I have a glare on my glasses and I cannot tell you where it's coming from. I have lights and windows and I'm just sorry about that. Today I want to show you what you can do when you have a failed dough. So last night I made some bread dough. I was going to make some hamburger buns for dinner tonight. We ended up buying dinner tonight because it didn't turn out. So this is a ball of dough that I had started, and it's sat here for 8 hours plus, and it did not double in size. It is softer, and it was going to be a hamburger bun recipe, so I have butter in here because that helps soften the dough. But it didn't rise. It never doubled. And so I have been doing this for, oh man, years. I don't even remember. I told you in one of my videos. And I still have failures. I still have dough that doesn't proof once in a while. Sometimes it's because I didn't feed my starter as religiously as I should have. And I guarantee that's why this one didn't do it, is because I did not feed it the night before. I fed it the night before that. So, and it's still okay. It's not bad. As a matter of fact, it's totally, I'll show you. It is still doing its thing. It's okay. I just fed it after I used the starter to make the dough. I fed it again and it's right back to normal. So now if I were to try to make dough tonight, it would rise just fine. I just want to talk to you a little bit about what I can do with this. Do not throw that away. That is so good for so many other things. So you know that in here there's flour, water, there is wild yeasts, not a ton, but there are wild yeasts. It has the sour smell of a sourdough because it is still sourdough. I call it a failed dough. It's not failed as far as you can use it for other things. It's just failed for bread. So I just want to talk about this. When you have this failed dough, if you can think of another name, mention it in the comments down below, because failed dough just sounds awful. It sounds like you gotta throw it away. Please don't throw it away. When you are baking, there's 3 major leavening agents that are out there. There's yeast, baking soda, and baking powder, which is actually baking soda with other stuff added to it. At this point, I could add yeast. I would be a little leery of that because 1, I like a full fermented dough. 2, I would have to add the yeast to water to activate it, and that's going to make this dough that is very beautiful and soft right now too wet. Another thing I could do is add a different leavening agent like baking soda or baking powder to it, and that is going to create something completely different. So in this loaf of bread, I have butter added to it. What butter does, it's a fat. And I like to use butter in stuff like rolls, biscuits, hamburger buns. You could use infused oils in here too. Like if you had like a garlic or rosemary infused oil and use that in here. What the butter does is it coats the strands of the glutens. And when it coats those strands of gluten, it makes them tender. So it gives you a tender crumb with a finer grain. I don't know how else to, it's more moist. You know, when you think about when you make your quick breads and stuff like that, there's a lot of oil in those and a lot of butter sometimes. How moist and tender can that bread be? Another thing that you could add is eggs. Eggs they absorb water. When you use eggs, you're going to want to make sure that you counter that absorption with butter or a fat of some sort or sugar. Other proteins like protein powders you could use, milk solids you could use, milk, cream, any of those proteins that you would put into your bread. So like when you make banana bread, you use banana, you use egg, unless you're allergic to eggs or something like that. Some people like to put milk in there. Have you ever made cookies where you added milk and those cookies were crispy? Or we have a banana cookie recipe that I think we add milk to that, and those are more cakey. They don't have that chewy cookie consistency. So you want to pay attention to what you're using in here, but I just wanted to tell you all that because those open options for you. Some of the options that I could do with this at this point where it's at right now, where it's not, it doesn't have any extra leavening to it, I could do a pizza crust with this. This would make a perfectly fine pizza crust. I personally like my pizza crust to have a thick chewiness to it versus a light, airy, bubbliness to it. I could probably do soft pretzels with this. I could probably do a flatbread where I roll it out and cook it on the flat griddle. Should we try it? First thing I'm going to try here is I am going to just take a ball. I'm going to tilt you down. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make this, try it. Let's try it. I mean, why not? It's a failed dough. We can do whatever we want with this now. And since my bread is a no-go, it's carte blanche, right? Or how do you say that? You just want to make sure that you roll it out really, really thin. Ooh, fry bread. You could do a fry bread with this. All right, so I'm going to move you over to my stove. Okay, so my pan that I'm going to do that flatbread on is heating up. I'm also going to put some oil in here, and we're going to try frying one like fry bread and see what happens. I might have to add some baking soda or baking powder to the bread, but we'll see. We're going to start without it first and see what happens. Okay, rolled this out. I'm going to put it on here. My pan is hot. Working with cast iron, you always want to make sure your pan is nice and hot. So here is the piece I'm going to put in. It's not super thick. See? I'm going to put that in and give it about a minute on each side. And hopefully this one doesn't turn quite as dark. That's a little too dark for me. I don't really like it that dark. But it is like bread inside. I love fry bread. We like to do those tacos where you put like all your taco fillings on top of the fry bread. It's also good with butter and jam, or butter and honey, or butter and cinnamon sugar. Super, like, here, add more fat, add more oil to it, right? Okay, so we're going to turn this over. Give it a couple more minutes. This one's getting a little bit dark too. This stove, I hate this stove. I would take you outside, but it's noisier outside than it is in my house right now. I like to cook on my Camp Chef a lot, especially in the heat of summer. And I'm using coconut oil in here. I just feel like it's a better, healthier oil. Okay, so there's my done product. And I don't see why we couldn't just make them smaller and have real thin hamburger buns. I mean, we could even do something like that. On my Camp Chef flat top, it would be done like in no time. But on this, I mean, you could use it like a taco shell, gordita shell kind of a thing, or really it's just an option that you can do so you're not throwing away that bread dough. This would be my #1 choice to do with failed dough. Now see, it's really soft and pliable. It's not stiff, it's not sticky, it's not hard, it's beautiful dough. It just isn't rising. And I think it could be because I have too much butter in it, but I really think it's because I didn't feed my starter. So for this one, this is the size of a full loaf of bread. So it's about the amount that I would use for a batch of cinnamon rolls. So I'm going to, I kind of wanted to sprinkle that just a little bit better. I'm going to get this in here. It's 1 teaspoon of baking soda. And now the fun part is trying to get all that incorporated. So we are going to have to do a little bit of kneading here. And to knead, we are not kneading it for any other reason than to incorporate the baking soda all the way into it. And yes, it is going to work on the texture of the bread a little bit, but really when you're making sourdough, all those little bacteria do all this kneading work for you. adding that baking soda is not helpful. And see, it's going to get really sticky. Now mind you, I have no flour on my surface. I don't have oil on there. I don't have water. The dough is just that perfect consistency that I don't need any of that. And the thing with baking soda is it starts to break up those gluten. So I just knead it until it starts to get even stickier. This tells me that the baking soda is breaking up and mixing in all the way. So at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and get my bowl, and I'm gonna get this, scoop this up back into my bowl, and I'm gonna use a 1/4 cup scoop to make my English muffins. They're not the same as your perfectly round store-bought English muffins. They're not. They are homemade, and I'm okay with that. Now mind you, that is the same recipe. As my hamburger buns, I just added baking soda to it. So I'm going to shape this into a little circle, and I don't mind it not being perfect. And I'm going to set it on here on low. Make sure your pan is hot, so it's still hot from when I did this flatbread. It's not piping hot. I want it on low, because low is going to help it. And yes, I have a little bit of grease. Help it rise a little bit. So I'm just using my 1/4 cup scoop, scooping it out of my bowl, and then shaping it. And hopefully this stove maintains a heat. And I'm going to let this sit here for about 15 minutes, and then I'm going to flip them for another 15 minutes. I'll be back to show you when my timer goes off for 15 minutes. Okay, really hot in here, so I got a fan blowing in here as well, so sorry if you hear that noise. Oh, this one's getting too hot. Stupid stove. I just don't love this stove. So this is my grandma's pan, or used to be my grandma's pan. She's no longer with us, so it is a little warped, but man, I love this pan. It works just fine. Look at that. I just want to show you. See those little orange stripey kind of things? That's just from the baking soda, their baking powder. I put baking soda in these, so it's just from the baking soda. I mean, I incorporate it as well as I can, but it is what it is. And it's okay. You can't even taste. I'll be back in 15 minutes. Okay, so these are my last two. And I have my heat down on really low, but the pan is still really hot from before. So that was 15 minutes on that side, much better looking. I'm gonna let it go another 15 minutes. I have it on the like 1.5 basically. I'll be back. And this is doing much better, but I've got it on like low 1.5. All right guys, so this was on 1.5, I mean low 1.5. So it looks like it did perfect. It looks like I might have found that I have to be on low 1.5. Low is a little too low. 2 is way too high. This is what happens on 2. And only on one side of the pan. So like this is a little dark, but it's not burnt. I don't know. Let's get a fork and I'll show you. It feels like it's a little gummy inside. So really, it might be too low because the heat has to be so low. I don't know. So it looks actually quite nicely in there. I like the holes. I like that it looks like it looks pretty good. And if it is a slightly gummy, you're gonna toast it. 9 times out of 10, you're gonna toast or grill an English muffin. So we have a tendency to toast them, and they make really good sandwiches. They make really good toast for breakfast. Oh, sausage, egg, and cheese muffins for on-the-go breakfasts. I'm gonna let that sit there. The heat's off. It can just stay there. These, I will salvage the ones I can. So I kind of feel like this is like when your failed bread dough fails. I think with the failed loaf, I actually prefer the English muffins. I do the English muffins a lot, but I usually do them out of my Camp Chef, so I usually don't, they don't burn out there. isn't that sad that you can control a Camp Chef flame better than you can a flat top stove? The fry bread turned out really good too. So I would probably try doing that again. But the English muffins are my favorite. If it's not going to rise on the counter, it's not going to have oven spring. Sourdough is already kind of slow with oven spring anyway. Not like not like active yeast or instant yeast. This is it's slower. Thank you for joining me today. See you next time on Fork in the Loaf.